Hello my viewers, sorry for the lack of recent uploads. I've just been really busy with a lot of things. Anyways, welcome back to more Advanced League content. This is week 4 of season 15. And this week, the Reggie Runners, my team, faced the Chilling Woopers, Zelph's team, and I have 3 games to present. Going in, I was expecting some of these games to be stall heavy, so I tried to bring teams that can last really long, while also having some offensive pressure. Let's see how these games unfold. Also, I forgot to mention this is week 4 and I won't be going through the entire game, at least for game 1. I'll actually make it more of a highlight reel just to conserve time. Anyways, there's a Milotic lead and I lead with Salamence. I'm pretty sure my Salamence is choice banded. Now I send in Blissey to take Hypnosis because I need something to sack to sleep. But since I have Natural Cure I can switch to something else, like Hariyama, and I got lucky with a Hypnosis dodge. Another Hypnosis dodge is very surprising and very lucky for me. It lets me knock off Milotic's leftovers, which is actually pretty important. Another Hypnosis dodge? Are you kidding me? While this early game may seem lucky, it really isn't going to matter later on. So I reveal Thunderbolt on Blissey, and I thought the Celebi was going to be threatening with Leech Seed, but in hindsight it kinda wasn't. Milotic was the bigger threat here. Now this Choice Band Salamence can go wild with Hidden Power Flying, but Milotic is the best answer to this Salamence set, at least for Zelph's team. So I do some pivoting and both of us get more information on each other's teams. My Jirachi set is Firachi, which is Wish, Protect, Fire Punch, and Toxic, and Snorlax's Body Slam, as you will see, paralyzes my Hariyama. That's a double-edged sword though. Guts is nice, which I have right here. Oh, actually it doesn't say it. Never mind, but I'm pretty sure it was Guts. But the full paralysis turns could put me in a precarious situation later on. Now next turn, I could have predicted a Milotic switch and used Focus Punch, but I ended up going for Brick Break instead. This is a safe play, which is probably too conservative in hindsight. But the fact that Snorlax could have hit me with Body Slam or Earthquake on the Focus Punch charge turn could have probably put me in a worse situation that I did not want to have happen here. Now the next thing I want to mention here is that Celebi, I actually could have had Blissey stay in on the Celebi, but I actually decided to switch into a different Pokemon with lower HP stats to tank Celebi's Leech Seeds. And this is because, again, I thought Celebi was the bigger threat than Milotic, which is a big error on my part, but Celebi can't really do much if I stay in with like Blissey or maybe like some other, no, maybe just Blissey in this case. Even though Leech Seed could heal the teammates for a lot of HP, but in reality, Celebi should not be using Leech Seed this often because Celebi only has 16 of them, and they run out pretty fast, especially in a stall match, so I should have let Celebi waste their Leech Seed PP so that I can actually keep my team healthy and I can still maintain my ground and stuff like that. If you thought my position was bad, it's actually going to get worse, as you will see, because Celebi Baton passes into Magneton, trapping me, and Fire Punch would normally be a 2-hit KO in this range, but what ends up happening is that Magneton survives after using Protect, and Snorlax comes in as I use Wish. But what I should have done was probably sacrifice Jirachi and use Fire Punch to try to burn the Snorlax. This actually comes into play later on. I use Protect to actually receive the Wish, and I realized that the Snorlax does have Earthquake. Not much happens afterwards. I immediately do some more pivoting around, and I actually do get slept by the Blissey, by the Milotic on my Blissey, and I pass a Wish to my Hariyama after it takes a Body Slam. And what happens next is I try to Focus Punch the Milotic switch, and I get the switch, but full paralysis. Now this is where the double-edged sword really hits me hard. A few turns later, I look back at my Blissey staying in on Snorlax, and I ended up Thunderbolting it to get the paralysis. I don't understand why I did this. I guess I wanted to preserve HP on my other mons, or I was just desperate for a status, but this Thunderbolt paralysis does backfire, as I said before, and I can no longer burn it with Jirachi. More pivoting happens, and I get another opportunity with Hariyama on the Snorlax. But instead of using Focus Punch, I actually went for Brick Break, but once again, I get fully paralyzed. How annoying. So I'm going to skip a couple of turns till I get to a turning point, which is on turn 41 where I have Salamence in against Milotic, and if you just saw on screen, Hidden Power Flying did 37%, which means that if this next one is a critical hit, I can KO the Milotic pretty cleanly. But the problem with that is I don't know what this Milotic has. Most likely has Surf, Toxic, Recover, and Refresh like every Milotic has. But, I mean, this is already a Deviant set with Hypnosis, so its fourth move definitely could have been Ice Beam, and Toxic wouldn't have been helpful either, but at least my Salamence could have still done something. So, if Hidden Power didn't crit, and Milotic Ice Beams or Toxics me, I would have actually been in a worse situation. Though this Milotic probably was forced to recover anyway, so if I did get the critical hit while Milotic was forced to use Recover, then I would have safely killed it, and that would have been really, really good for me. And if I didn't crit, I probably would have had another opportunity to do that later. But since I passed up on that opportunity by switching out to Blissey, Milotic gets to full health cleanly, and Hypnosis me again, which is not important. And the matchup is still in Zelph's favor. So finally I reveal Claydol, and I'll use that as my dedicated sleep sack. And I should have probably used it for Explosion later on, but I did not want to explode at the wrong time, which probably would have been bad for me. But I was already in a bad situation, so I might as well. I also reveal Suicune here, so my whole team is entirely revealed. And that Meteor Mash attack boost was not favorable. Now basically what I'm trying to do is set up a Calm Mind sweep as a last-ditched Hail Mary effort of sorts. But that actually won't be really easy. So I spent plenty of turns spamming Calm Mind, and this Metagross ended up being an agility set. But after getting Leech Seeded and being forced to rest consistently, I wouldn't be able to really do anything. I probably should have attacked a couple of times, but that probably wouldn't have done me much better anyway. So eventually I'll be forced to switch out because I will have, well, maybe not yet, but I rest up again, and Celebi actually reveals Swords Dance. So this is actually a Swords Dance pass team, which is actually scary. Combine a +2 boost with agility on Metagross, and that can end games right on the spot. Then afterwards, my Suicune dies from a combination of a boosted Snorlax's Body Slam, followed by a Choice Band Salamence's Hidden Power Flying. I try to threaten it out with Salamence of my own, and I make a good prediction by using Brick Break, but Zelph catches that and sacrifices Magneton. That's a small victory compared to what happens next. Celebi gets another opportunity to set up Swords Dance, and I thought a Baton Pass was incoming, but apparently Celebi uses Leech Seed, and I get a free Wish off. Not that it really matters, because Zelph can just send in Snorlax with a +2 attack, and this is why I shouldn't have paralyzed its Snorlax. The Fire Punch could not have burnt it, which would have actually been game-changing. But alas, now I'm kind of flailing around here because I send in Salamence to try to Brick Break it. I get a lucky full paralysis there, and I predict the Milotic switch by using Hidden Power Flying, but Zelph must have calced that and sent in Metagross to deny me the opportunity to kill the Milotic, which makes sense of course. I send in Jirachi to dodge, well, not to dodge Earthquake, it actually takes a huge chunk. A good prediction from Zelph. I was playing pretty predictably at this point. And I was so desperate to get the Fire Punch burn, and I don't get it. And Metagross reveals Agility. Now, disaster is about to come, which is really, really sad. I dodge Earthquake, not that it really matters. And Meteor Mash actually does not kill me, so I do kill the Metagross. So we're getting somewhere, but Celebi could just Swords Dance Pass again. So, did I really make a big difference here? Not really. Apparently I said in the chat that there's a 37.5% chance that the Metagross could have killed my Salamence with Meteor Mash, so I got a little bit lucky there. Celebi's boosted teammates ended up killing 2 of my other Mons, and I pretty much ran out of options at this point. So yeah, Celebi got to like +4 attack there, and Body Slam pretty much one-hit KOs my Claydol. I should have been more mindful of denying Celebi opportunities to set up and pass Swords Dance, but I was afraid of Milotic and Celebi's Leech Seed. It did get low on PP at some point, but the damage had already been done. I don't have any more win conditions, and not even Salamence can do much with Hidden Power Flying because of Celebi's Recover Stall. Luckily on turn 96, what ends up happening is that I did get a Wish Pass to my Bandit Salamence. What is happening? And if I did that more often over the course of the game, that would have this Salamence would have been more threatening. Well, actually now I can actually 2-hit KO the Celebi. And finally Milotic dies, but it's kind of too late at this point. This Salamence forces out my Salamence, so I send in Blissey here. And I actually take Hidden Power Flying pretty well. And I just realized this Salamence was not choice locked, it actually had leftovers. So this incoming Rock Slide crit me unexpectedly, and that actually was pretty bad because now Salamence is more restricted on which moves it can use, which is actually pretty bad in this endgame, in this game state. I was pretty frustrated that that Rock Slide crit me, although it makes up for Zelph's unfortunate Hypnosis luck earlier in the game. Snorlax gets sacrificed to my Hidden Power Flying, and now Salamence can come back in again to intimidate me, and this is how the game ends. I switch in Jirachi, and Salamence gets the opportunity it needs to Dragon Dance, and it sweeps the rest of my team. So in reality, this game wasn't as lopsided as it was. I mean, look at that. This game was pretty close. Celebi was at 74%, which was almost at the range for my Salamence's Hidden Power Flying, but if I did a couple of things differently, I definitely would have had a good chance to win this game. And I wasn't really tilting when I was falling behind this entire game. I was still trying my hardest to win, and I was like still on my A game, to put it in another way. But both of us got pretty equal luck, all things considered, so Zelph was definitely playing better, and it would have probably been a fluke if I actually won that game. We are over 12 minutes into the recording, and I failed to actually keep this game concise. I am so sorry, guys. So this next game is also really long, and I'll skip around to save time as much as I can. I'm using a Spikes team that has some longevity, while my opponent is running a Spikes immune Superman team, with some interesting off-meta picks. So, Zelph leads with Skarmory, and I lead with Tyranitar. On the first turn, I immediately send in Fortress, which is my designated counter for Skarmory, and I use Spikes again. I was anticipating a Rapid Spin blocker to come in, so I don't Rapid Spin right away. Now, I suspected this Misdreavus is going to have Mean Look, Thunderbolt, Perish Song, and Rest, a very infuriating set for most Pokemon, as I was preparing for a team like this in the previous week, so I kind of have the leg up on Zelph here. Now, I don't want to lose Fortress this early, so I immediately switch out to Gengar to try to taunt the Misdreavus, but Zelph decides to send Skarmory again. I make a misplay here by revealing Taunt early, and thus next turn I'm going to have to use Will-O-Wisp. Which is actually good because Skarmory used Drill Peck instead of switching, so that got weakened. Unfortunately, this Will-O-Wisp isn't going to matter that much, as you'll see later, but in most cases this actually would have been very good. I send in Fortress here, as Zelph doubles to Blissey. Now in retrospect this was probably a bad decision, but I immediately switched Fortress out because I was fearing Fire Blast from Blissey, which sometimes it runs on gimmick sets and stuff like that, but Zelph pulls a really good double switch. As I sent in Blissey, Misdreavus actually gets sent in, which is a very favorable matchup for Zelph, so I have to immediately switch out. I send in Gengar on the Mean Look turn, which is to be expected, and since Misdreavus has Thunderbolt, it's not helpless against Gengar. It even predicts the taunt, which, if I didn't reveal taunt already, that would have actually been good for me. We now exchange Thunderbolts for a couple of turns, and I get spared as Zelph sends in Blissey to take Misdreavus' place. I feel like Zelph should have tried to kill my Gengar by spamming Thunderbolt because my Gengar can't really do anything. Maybe if I had Destiny Bond, that would have been a whole other story. But I don't think Destiny Bond was the obvious prediction here. But I guess you could use the same logic for me switching out of Blissey a couple turns ago with Fortress. Next turn I switch in Blissey once again, and dodge an Ice Beam. Ooh, that critical hit wasn't that good, but honestly it doesn't really matter too much. Now next turn things kinda take a change here, and Blissey reveals Aromatherapy, so statusing the teammates wouldn't be that good in the long run. Oh, and I get a returning critical hit, and I freeze the Blissey, and not that it really matters, but hey, that's pretty interesting. I'm gonna skip ahead to turn 17, and this is a really important play that I did here. I had Fortress in on the turn previously, and Zelph was probably trying to block Rapid Spin again, but I caught that switch by sending in my own Tyranitar, and you're about to see a very decisive play unfold here. So what you're going to see is Mischievous will try to switch out, and I Pursuit Trap it down to 14%, and Moltres comes in. This is actually really beneficial for me because Mischievous was a big threat to some of my Pokemon if it manages to land off Mean Look plus Perish Song. But since it's at low HP, it's very, very vulnerable, and I'll have to make sure it doesn't rest up for free. Now Moltres comes in, and my Tyranitar can't really threaten it, which is ironic. The best I could do is crunch and hope for a special defense drop, and I probably could have tanked a Hidden Power Grass or Will-O-Wisp, but I chose the safer play by switching in Blissey. Blissey comes in here, and I use Ice Beam again, just for some extra chip damage. And what you'll notice here is that this Blissey is at 22% HP, so if I was able to actually threaten it with another Pokemon, by dealing like more damage and outspeeding, I could have actually killed this Blissey much earlier, and that would have been a lot of significant progress. But I'm gonna have to let it heal, which kinda sucks. Next, Zapdos comes in, and this is actually going to be pretty bad for me, because this Zapdos is actually a Rest Talker with Thunderbolt and Roar as its last two moves. So combined with the Pressure ability, Zapdos can really like PP stall most of my Pokemon. Even though it can't do a lot of damage to some of my Pokemon, the fact that it can spam Roar with Spikes up can really put my team in a precarious situation here. I also need to spin as soon as possible with Fortress so that Zapdos once again cannot roar me to oblivion. And also, this Blissey is tasked to dealing with multiple special attackers like the Moltres and Zapdos, and as well as Blissey itself. So my Blissey is very susceptible to losing PP on all 4 of its moves. So I have to be very careful about that. Though in this game I kind of wasn't, and I think I got rewarded for it. We'll have to see. So an interesting note about the Swampert is that this is an offensive Swampert with Hydro Pump, Earthquake, Ice Beam, and Protect. Against a Pressure Stall user, that's not a lot of PP. So I have to be very careful and have to use my moves wisely here, which kind of sucks because Zapdos can't do any direct damage to Swampert, only via roaring it in with Spikes. So that kind of sucks here. I'm going to skip to turn 30. And what's this? Fortress KO's Mischievous? That's right. Fortress was in against Skarmory again, and Zelph tried to block the Rapid Spin again, but I knew I needed to kill this Mischievous right away, so I just used Hidden Power Bug and I knocked it out, which further puts me in an advantageous position. Some more pivoting happens here, like mostly Blissey on Blissey action, but I eventually get Fortress in on Skarmory, and you'll notice that the Skarmory is continuously using Drill Peck, which is actually kind of a problem here because I can't keep Fortress in on Skarmory, as Skarmory will win the one-on-one. So I'll have to have some turns where Zelph keeps Spikes on the field, which is not good for me. So yeah, on turn 48, I ended up getting Salamence in on the Skarmory just to threaten it and kind of punish it for spamming Drill Peck, but the Fire Blast crit, while it looks good on the surface, was actually pretty bad, as now Fortress has fewer openings to Rapid Spin. So this actually kind of was a double-edged sword. I may have 2 extra Pokemon alive, but this doesn't really put me in an advantageous position here. Also, sorry for sounding like a broken record here. Sometimes finding the right words to say in a live commentary is pretty hard for me, and due to my recording setup, I can't exactly have a script on me at the same time. But I'll make do with the tools that I have. So I switched meta in to take another Flamethrower, and I get a very unlucky burn. Though I do get the Wish off, so that is sort of a compensation. but this burn is actually going to be really meaningful later on in the game, against me. Soon my Blissey gets hit by Will-O-Wisp, and I ended up staying in for a couple of turns, which is actually pretty bad because I have to use my healing moves more often, and I don't have that many. Like, you'll see that I'll have like 11 soft bows and 12 witches, which may be a lot, but I actually use a lot of them later on, especially when I'm tasked with dealing with 3 Pokemon at once. Well, not at once, but you know what I mean. I should have switched out here, but I was worried about Zelph mixing up their plays and hitting my other Pokemon with strong attacks, especially Will-O-Wisp once they hit my Choice Band Salamence. So I kind of had to let Blissey take the fall, but luckily I get spared a little bit, and Zapdos comes in for a little bit of temporary relief. So yeah, there's some more stalling that goes around, mainly Blissey on Blissey, but also Blissey on Zapdos. I use a lot of healing moves here. You can see that I'm down to 8 wishes and 7 soft boils. I'm telling you, these things go by quickly, and it's not because of the speed that I'm recording here. You'll notice on turn 89, for some reason, Zelph decides to sacrifice their Moltres, and I don't understand why, but that's good for me. I can't really do the same to the Zapdos because rest, and it's faster than me. So yeah, that's fun. Now I have Salamence here, and I definitely could have used Dragon Claw, but I must have overlooked the fact that my Salamence was faster, so I decided to switch into Swampert, and Zelph double switches here. And using Dragon Claw on the Flygon wouldn't have been so bad, but instead what happens is Flygon uses Toxic on my Swampert, and I Ice Beam, which is not a favorable trade. I mean, I get use out of it later on, but Swampert being hit by Toxic is not good whatsoever. Also, you'll notice that I'm going to switch in Salamence here, predicting an Earthquake or something, or Protect, and Flygon predicts it by going for Rock Slide. Whoop-de-doo! Well, at least I can kill it. But that damage might not actually be good. We'll have to see. Oh yeah, there was one turn I kind of forgot to, that I kind of overlooked here. Eventually there comes a point where I'm trying to use Wish on Fortress, but I messed up because I think I forgot to account for spikes, and Seismic Toss from Blissey killed my Fortress, which is really, really bad, so I'm gonna have to end this game with 1 spike up. How will I overcome this? Anyways, I'm gonna go to turn 117 because this is like the next thing that happens. That's at least worth a note here. And I have to let Tyranitar go here. I mean, I survived Thunderbolt, but I'm gonna die to burn damage, and the special defense drop doesn't really mean much, unfortunately. As much as I really wanted it to. More stalling happens, and I'm gonna skip to turn 127. And this was actually a bold play for me to send in Salamence, but I successfully managed to catch it on the rest turn. I believe this puts me into a good position here, but let's move on a little bit. So next turn I just go for Dragon Claw, trying to batter this Zapdos down, and I'm pretty much just praying to Sleep Talk RNG here. I go for Dragon Claw again, and Sleep Talk hits Roar, and I get Swampert back in. I send in Gengar here as Zapdos tries to rest again, which is a decent play. And here's an interesting play that I made on turn 131. I used Taunt to block Sleep Talk, although I probably could have been a little less passive and just spammed Ice Punch, but I think this won't really matter in the long run. I used Will-O-Wisp here to predict a Blissey switch, and I did not get that, so that kinda sucks. Next turn I just go back to Blissey and do more stalling, and I just take another Thunderbolt. A couple turns later, I use Ice Punch and I get a really lucky critical hit, and I take the Thunderbolt here. So it looks like when I was actually doing this battle, I had a damage calc up, and I thought this Zapdos had less special bulk than it actually had, so it looked like Ice Punch was a guaranteed one-hit KO. However, that turns out not to be the case, and Zapdos lives. And I lost my Gengar, which could have been avoided. So I send in Salamence to try to revenge kill, and what I do next is I actually go for Brick Break here. Zelph actually switches in Blissey, expecting me to use Dragon Claw, and I think Brick Break was also a roll, so there was a chance that Zapdos could have survived and Thunderbolted me to Oblivion. So that would have not been fun. But luckily, now that Blissey is at low HP, I'm pretty much poised to win the game. So I just use Brick Break again, and I used Dragon Claw, so I've won the game. Just like that. So I didn't have to go into an excruciatingly long stall war. I mean, we've got to turn 140, but my Blissey still had 3 wishes and 2 soft-boiled, so yeah, I couldn't really stall for that much longer, to be honest. I would have had to rely on switch stalling and stuff like that. But overall, this was a pretty interesting game. Even though my team wasn't a complete counter to the Superman team, I felt proud of myself for actually being able to shut it down. Even though Zelph did have the upper hand for most of the game, I made a couple of decisive plays by putting myself into some good positions to actually break through some of Zelph's defensive Pokemon, which is what led me to winning this game, even despite my misplays. I shouldn't hold you guys for too much longer, we should get on with the third game. So we have the third game right here, and this one is also really stally, so I'll end up skipping through part of the game to conserve time. So Zelph leads with Aerodactyl and I lead with Tyranitar. Aerodactyl leads are pretty unorthodox, so they're not always easy to prepare for, but naturally I have to switch in Swampert, and Zelph actually double switches, which is putting Zelph in an advantageous position here. Now I have to switch in Blissey and Thunder Wave it, as it uses Calm Mind. Oh, actually I do it on the second turn to scout for sub. I basically chip down Suicune for a couple of turns until it rests, and then Suicune ends up... Okay, I have to repeat the song and dance a couple of times until I have Tyranitar roar it. So for Blissey, when I originally chose this team, I wanted the Blissey to have a Calm Mindset with Thunderbolt and Ice Beam, but for the expected matchup to face for Game 3, Thunder Wave would have been better, but since this was not the exact team I was preparing for, this was kind of a decision that's going to haunt me later. Or will it? We'll have to find out. So yeah, if I have to face up against multiple special attackers here, Blissey is going to be in trouble. Now for the next couple of turns I use Fortress to set up a layer of spikes, and Skarmory does the same thing. I use Jirachi as a sleep sacrifice, which may have been a misplay. It's always tricky to figure out which of your team members you should sacrifice to Spore or Sleep Powder, especially when you don't know what your opponent's team is going to be based on only like 3 or 4 Mons. I send in Salamence to dodge a Focus Punch, and Suicune comes in here as I miss Fire Blast. Actually, don't miss Fire Blast, that happens later. I use Roar instead, and the other Blissey gets revealed. And then there's going to be a bunch of, well, normally there would be a bunch of Blissey on Blissey action, but instead we decided to clear spikes with Rapid Spin. And now more stalling occurs. And then I send in Salamence to Roar. Yeah, this is going to be a frequent thing here. A frequent series of events. I don't really have much to pressure this team, so I pretty much have to quote-unquote win a war of attrition. Nothing notable happens until 36, where Breloom switches out and I miss Fire Blast. This is what I was talking about earlier. And then I switch in Swampert as Suicune woke up, and I try to Toxic it, but Skarmory switches in and absorbs it. And here we have Drill-Peck Skarmory versus Fortress. Skarmory's going to win this in the long game, so I'm going to have to use my Spikes and Rapid Spin sparingly, which is not favorable in the slightest, considering most of my Mons are weak to Spikes, so this is going to be a losing battle for me. Then Skarmory gets a nasty Drill-Peck critical hit as soon as it gets 3 layers of Spikes, and sadly Claydol Rapid Spins them away a couple turns later. Suicune comes back in as I send in Jirachi, and I actually burn a sleep turn with Jirachi, and Zelph misplays by going for Roar. I mean, Roar wasn't the worst thing ever, but like, Zelph could have definitely taken advantage of the sleep with Calm Mind or Surf. And now the Spikes chip is happening over time, and it's really affecting most of my Pokemon, as Suicune is spamming Roar, which kind of sucks here, but I kind of have to just deal with it. And I wish I could do the same, but I just don't have a good matchup. Eventually, I get Claydol pretty low on HP from my Ice Beam from Blissey, and I imagine Claydol's going to use Explosion here, so I send in my Slept Pokemon to tank it, but Claydol goes for Earthquake and makes a good prediction. So that further puts Zelph on the upper hand here. Now at this point I kind of have to play a bit aggressively, and Zelph sends in Suicune, but I get a lucky Dragon Claw crit. Makes up for the Drill Peck crit from earlier. And now I don't really have a better incentive than just Dragon Claw again, and I hit Aerodactyl. And Zelph actually makes a good play by switching Suicune again, as I have to switch in Swampert. So Suicune has another opportunity to rest up and heal all of its damage back, or all of its HP back. And it just does that, but it gives me free entry into Fortress, so that I can Rapid Spin. So now spikes are cleared off both sides of the field. So Skarmory keeps drill pecking my Fortress, so what I end up revealing is Counter, which doesn't really do much because Fortress is already at low HP. I get Salamence in on a Drill Peck, and I use Fire Blast to try to force it out, but I actually predict the Skarmory switch out, and I actually use Dragon Claw. So over the next couple of turns, I actually got my Mixed Ments to knock out Suicune, which is actually pretty huge, but not that huge in the grand scheme of things, but it was like a small victory for me. Now I send in Swampert on the Forced Rock Slide, and a bunch of turns pass with nothing significant happening, although my Fortress is getting dangerously low and Skarmory keeps setting up spikes. I made a bad prediction here by switching in Tyranitar. My Fortress was at 6%, actually it was at 12% after leftovers, and now it can no longer switch into spikes. I should have tried to Rapid Spin it at all costs, but once again, I was just making a short-sighted prediction and it didn't work out. Now I am permanently screwed after Skarmory's going to get up 2 layers and later 3 layers. I roar an Aerodactyl here, and I decide to trade Meta's HP for Crunch so I can actually kill the Aerodactyl, which was pretty good, not gonna lie. What I do next is sacrifice Fortress so that I skip Breloom's turn, and I can force Breloom out with my Salamence. I predict a switch, and I go for Brick Break here. And I felt inclined to use Brick Break again because I didn't want my Salamence to die to Blissey, but Claydol comes in and takes another Brick Break. So that could have been a misplay, or a really awesome play if I managed to get a different move off. Zelph sacrifices Claydol here, and then Skarmory comes back in. Now on the next turn I use Fire Blast, and I get Skarmory really low, and then it uses Roar, so Tyranitar comes back in. And afterwards I use Roar first to catch Skarmory's Roar, and Breloom comes in. Now I decided to sacrifice my Tyranitar here, but Zelph decides to switch in Skarmory as I use Crunch. Fire Blast was more guaranteed to KO the Skarmory than Crunch, so I just used that, and now there are just 2 Pokemon left. And now it's pretty much Blissey against 5 of my Pokemon here. But as you'll see later, Zelph has no reason to give up. And yeah, there are a whole bunch of turns where it's just Blissey on Blissey, and some of my other mons try to fish for some RNG like special drops. And admittedly, I could have preserved my Pokemon for longer periods of time, but in the moment I just felt like I didn't have better options. Just like last game, I'm going to be going through my healing moves PP pretty quickly, which is going to be danger later on. Yeah, I spammed Thunder Wave here, which is like really bad. That was kind of the big mistake I did this game, just paralyzing Blissey when I had other moves I could click. I also used Jirachi to burn sleep turns, but that was a huge, idiotic misplay that I made. I should have kept it asleep so that Breloom can't spore something. Now what I have to do is... Okay, I was forced to softball here, but if I Ice Beamed, I could have won the game. I had to use Swampert as the Sleep Sack here, which... again, cuts off from the amount of PP I can use. Breloom also... actually, you have to sack it again because Breloom has Focus Punch. Salamence was at 50%, so I couldn't really do much here. I actually do kill the Breloom, so that's pretty good. And now it's just 2-on-1. See? A lot of stuff has happened in the past like 20 turns or whatever. So it's not over yet. And now I just do a bunch of... now it's just a bunch of PP stalling. I spam Thunder Wave again just to get rid of it. And since Blissey's paralyzed and has no... it cannot switch out, Blissey has more turns to use whatever it wants because of those full paralysis turns, and I don't have that luxury. So had I used Thunder Wave a lot later in the game, only when I was absolutely forced to, I could have been good. Also, I was using Soft Boil a little too liberally by healing it when I have more than 50% HP, so I could have probably saved 1 or 2 PP in the long run if I played a little bit less conservatively. As you'll see later on, there's going to be one turn where I switch in Salamence just to... Oh, I did it there, but I'm going to do it again. Why is it lagging? Because I'm seeking too many times. I have to switch in Salamence just for the sake of switch stalling. And what you'll see is that Blissey catches the switch and uses Ice Beam, so now it's a true one-on-one. Also, Blissey has Aromatherapy, which is a blessing and a curse for it, but mostly a blessing in this case. I should have used up my Thunder Waves earlier. So yeah, what's gonna happen is I'm gonna run out of PP very soon, and once I do that, I have to struggle myself to death. And I forfeit the game just to save both of us what little time we had left. And I lose the set right here. I won 1 game and lost 2 games, and all of the games were really long. So yeah, this game appeared as if Zelph was poised to win the whole time, but had I optimized a handful of my plays, especially after overcoming the Calm Mind plus Roar Suicune, I would have had a good chance of turning things around, especially when it was 5 against 2 at one point. Skarmory's spikes really put in a lot of work this game, and I couldn't say the same about my fortresses. When Blissey blanket checks half of your opponent's team, you really need to make sure your other Pokemon get used at the right turns to preserve Blissey's HP, PP, and status. I definitely did not do that since I don't really play stall games all too much, and the inexperience has shown. Overall, I did learn a lot from this set, and I can be better prepared for future sets that involve stall in place of quick games involving 2 offensive teams. Hats off to Zelph for consistently outplaying me throughout the 3 games. I think when I was playing the games live, I was panicking real hard over not knowing what to do, but that's nothing a little game experience won't fix. Sorry for the incredibly long video, hopefully the background music kept you all occupied to some extent. I've got more sets to cover for Season 15 of the Advanced League, so be on the lookout for those. Thank you all for watching, and I'll be out of your way now.